Have you ever heard of the story of the Moonlight Map? It is this really bizarre tale that I first came across in a book called The Mammoth Book of Best New Horror, edited by Stephen Jones and Kim Newman. I love an anthology because you get to see all these different authors in one place. And this is like a greatest hits compilation of modern horror stories from like the 80s and 90s. So good stuff. And there are some really wild tales in there, but the one that has stuck with me for over 20 years is the Moonlight Map. There's something about it that has just never left me. I was quite young when I read it. I must have been in my teens, and I remember reading it and thinking, that is insane. Why did that happen? And then for years afterwards, whenever I saw the moon, I would think about that story and how disturbing it was. And recently I decided I need to share this with people because more people need to know about the Moonlight Map. Now, unfortunately, this particular edition of the anthology is out of print and very hard to find. But I have tracked down the original publication from 1994, which had just 3 of Stephen King's stories in it instead of 20. And so we were going to take a look at that today. But to be warned, if you don't want the story to be ruined for you, then stop watching now because I am going to tell you everything. We're going to jump straight into this one, guys. We meet our protagonist, who is unnamed, and he's driving home from a long trip. He's been away visiting his wife's parents. And he's actually picked up a flat tire on the way back. He has been sitting on the side of the road for hours trying to fix this tire, and he is basically exhausted. He's just ready to go to bed. But he needs to make one more stop on the way home. He needs to stop off at a gas station to fill up his car so that he can actually drive the last mile or so to get home. And he pulls into this gas station, which is on the outskirts of town, and he goes inside to pay for the gas. And there's a little old man behind the counter. And the old man asks him, "Can I help you, son?" And he says, "Yeah, thanks. I need to get a couple of things." And he proceeds to get some cigarettes and a newspaper and a magazine. The old man doesn't say anything. He just rings him up and watches him. And when he's done, he puts his things on the counter and he pays for them. As he's doing that, he notices a map in the magazine, and it's a map of the moon. It's one of those maps that shows you where the different regions are on the moon, the Sea of Tranquility, the Sea of Storms, the Sea of Happiness. And our protagonist, he takes this map and he puts it into his pocket and he goes outside. He gets into his car and he drives the rest of the way home. Once he gets home, he and his wife, whose name is Diana, they eat dinner together and they watch TV. They talk about her upcoming trip to visit her parents again. And then our protagonist, he starts to feel tired, so he goes upstairs to bed. Now, before he goes to sleep, though, he goes to the bathroom and looks at himself in the mirror. And he just got a pair of scissors in his hand, and he stares at his reflection and thinks about cutting off his balls. He's thinking about castrating himself. And he even says, what a beautiful thing it would be if he could cut off his own balls. He spends the whole night tossing and turning trying to sleep, but he can't. He keeps having nightmares about being chased through the woods by a woman in a Victorian nightgown. And every time he dreams this dream, he feels compelled to run, to keep moving, to not stop. In his dream, he's running away from the woman in the nightgown, but he doesn't know why. And he doesn't know who she is. But the terror that he feels in the dream is real. He wakes up sweating. And then he goes downstairs to get a drink of water. And while he's downstairs, he finds Diana's diary. And he knows he shouldn't, but he opens it up and he starts to read it. And he sees an entry from 2 days earlier. And in the diary entry, Diana is writing about how she had a nightmare about this woman in a nightgown. And how she dreamed that she ran into the forest and she couldn't find her way back home. She said it was the scariest dream she'd ever had. Then the unnamed protagonist, he goes back upstairs and he starts to read the entry out loud to Diana. And when she wakes up, she tells him that she had the same dream that night. And then he tells her about his nightmare. And Diana says, well, I guess we better go to the store today and pick up some milk. Because last night in her dream, she dreamed that they were out of milk. And he says, okay, let's go get the milk. So they drive into town and they park the car and they go into the grocery store. And while they're shopping, Diana keeps stopping our protagonist to tell him that he is holding the milk carton upside down or that he is putting the eggs in the wrong place. And he gets frustrated because he swears he isn't doing any of that. He swears that he is putting the items in the right place, but she keeps telling him that he's not. And eventually they get home. And he gets out of the car and he throws the bag of groceries onto the table and he yells at Diana saying, "I'm sick of you making me feel stupid." And then she says, "Why would I do that?" And then he screams at her, "Why do you keep telling me that I'm holding the milk carton upside down?" And then she's like, "I haven't said that to you." And then he realizes that she hasn't said that at all. So he walks away and he goes into the bedroom and he lies down on the bed. And he looks at the map of the moon that he took from a magazine and he studies it. And he sees that the features on the moon are actually faces. And he can see a face in the Sea of Tranquility, another one in the Sea of Happiness, and one more in the Sea of Storms. And he says, now I understand. And he goes to the window and he stares at the moon and he sees the three faces staring back at him and he smiles. And then the story ends. Now, what do you think of the story? I actually think it's pretty amazing. I love how much of a slow burn it is. You're not given a lot of information up front. You don't know why the guy is so angry. You don't know why Diana is afraid. There's no context. But then you slowly start to get pieces of the puzzle, and you see how these dreams are manifesting in reality. I also like that the main character is nameless and faceless. We don't know anything about him. And I think that adds to the horror of the story. I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes when I look at people, I can't help but imagine what their house might look like if they had one. Like, what would their kitchen cabinets look like? Would they be wood? Would they be linoleum? What color would their walls be? Sometimes I imagine what kind of car they drive or what kind of clothes they wear. I imagine these details about them, even though I know I'll never have any of that information. And I think the author uses that phenomenon and twists it in this story. The guy never gets a name or a face. And I think that makes him more relatable. I also love how mysterious the woman in the nightgown is. Like, who is she? Why does she keep appearing in their dreams? What is she trying to do? And then at the end, when you realize that she's actually the moon and that the moon is controlling these people, it all comes together so nicely. I love that twist ending. When I read this story as a teenager, I didn't understand it completely. I knew that the moon was important somehow, but I didn't know why. And I think that ambiguity can be terrifying. Not knowing why the main character is acting the way he is, not knowing why Diana is afraid. And then realizing that the moon is the source of all of their problems, that the moon is what's causing the chaos in their lives. That's a really cool concept. And it's also sad. And I know I've mentioned this before in other videos, but I love it when horror stories make me feel sad. And this one definitely does. If you're enjoying this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of the story? How would you rate it? Also, have you read any other short horror stories lately that you think I should check out? Please let me know in the comments because I always love finding new horror to read. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone, take care and stay spooky.